my rear suspension clunking and thumping and making all kinds of funny noises. But yeah, it's gotta go. Hey everybody, in today's video I have to replace the shocks in my NC here. It's got Tokico HTS shocks in there that are pretty old, pretty beat up, and it's time for something new. And I've decided that I'm going to switch over to coilovers. For this particular setup, I've chosen the Meister-R ZetaCRD. The reason I chose these is because I like my car to be fun on the street, but also be competent enough to go out on a track day. Now I may not be racing it, but I still want it to be decent on the track. And from what I've read, this is a good option. So today, I'm going to install these in my car. We're going to take it out for a drive, and I'm going to let you know what I think. So let's get started. And now that the car is safely in the air and on jack stands, I need to take off the wheel. And it's a good thing to have power tools for this. As you can see, the boots on these shocks are absolutely destroyed. You can see there's a lot of wear on them. These things are pretty tired. It's time for them to go. There's a bolt on this side and there's a bolt on this side that I'm going to have to take out to drop this control arm back. But before I can do that, there is an ABS sensor right here, and then there's a brake line that you can see is attached to it here. I need to remove these so that it'll be able to move freely of this piece, because I'm going to have to drop this whole piece to get the shock out. So to remove the ABS sensor, I'm going to take off this 12mm bolt right here. Next, I'm going to take off this 12mm bolt right here so I can free this brake line. You'll also want to take out this 12mm bolt next to the control arm so you can get the brake line out of the way, and it'll let you take the control arm bolt out. Next, we need to remove the sway bar end link so the control arm can drop down and allow the shock to come out. If the 14mm bolt on the end link just spins around, a 5mm Allen wrench may be necessary to keep the mounting bolt from turning. Then, we need to remove the lower shock bolt. You will need two 17mm wrenches to be able to remove this. Since my car is a Grand Touring with the premium package, it has a strut tower bar, and it also has this sound tube, and both of them are in the way. I need to remove the sound tube so I can get to the upper shock bolts. If you have an OEM strut tower bar, you will also need to remove this section to get the shocks out. And there's three 14mm nuts on the top that will loosen the top of the shock. Take those out next. So I'm going to take the 17mm bolt out here and over here, and that's going to loosen this control arm here. It's going to let me pop it out, and it's going to let me drop the shock down out of here. Now I'm going to do this off camera because it's kind of a pain in the ass to record it, but these are bolts on this side. This nut here is welded in, so you don't need to worry about putting a wrench on it. So go ahead and just pull out these two and then drop the control arm down. And here's a comparison of the old versus the new. You can see I'm going to have to adjust the coilover out a little bit because the ride height's going to be way too low as it is. And here you can see I have the shock in position. It's going to need to be adjusted still, but I'm just kind of trying to get it in there. And I'm going to loosely put the top nuts on there so it'll hold it in place. As you can see, I've got the shock in place. I still need to adjust this. Now the factory adjustment is for a 12.2 inch difference between the center of the wheel hub to the top highest point of the fender. And this is my daily driver. I need it to be higher than that. So I'm looking for about probably 13.5. Now they said online that if I adjust this distance, if I increase this, it's pretty much 1-to-1. So if I increase this by an inch, it's going to raise the vehicle height an inch. So I'm looking for, like I said, 13.5. So I'm going to increase this by 1.3 inches. So my solution is I have a caliper that I'm going to use to measure the distance between these two rings, and then I'm going to increase it by that much space. So what I need to do is I need to loosen this bottom ring and then turn the shock using this ring up here. You don't want to loosen these rings up here because they're already adjusted for the factory preload. So I'm going to leave these here, but I'm going to loosen this ring on the bottom and then adjust it for the correct height. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come right back. So I put the bolts in place here to kind of hold everything together while I get it tightened up. Before I tighten these up, I want to put some blue Loctite on them. Now the torque spec for these two bolts is between 62 and 72 foot-pounds of torque. So I'm going to do them about 68-ish, and I'm going to go ahead and put those in. So next I'm going to put in the lower shock bolt, and the lower shock bolt's torque spec is between 58 and 76 foot-pounds of torque. And just like the control arm bushings, I recommend that you put some blue Loctite on this bolt as well. Like I said, you don't want this stuff coming apart. And I'm going to torque this one to about 68 also. So next I'm going to put in the brake line bolts here and here. And I have the ABS sensor down here, which I'm probably going to do off camera because I don't think there's a good way to get an angle on it. But these bolts don't need a lot of torque. The factory torque spec is 13 to 19 foot-pounds. Now you'll note that I haven't hooked up the sway bar end length, and that's because I want to move it to this front hole here instead of the one it was in. And that's because this is a Flying Miata sway bar. It's heavier than stock. I want to loosen it up a little bit so I can use more of the benefit of the coilovers. So I'm going to put it in this hole and see how that goes. I am replacing the rear bar with the one from a sport model, so I have the lightest sway bar I could get. But we'll see how this works in here, and I may replace this one later. Who knows? All right, so I'm using the nuts that came with the shocks, so these are brand new. The torque spec for this is between 32 and 45 foot-pounds. So one thing I want to point out here is if you have the stock strut tower bar, the bolts that hold it onto the shock mount here, you don't want to torque those things tight. They're like 12 to 20 foot-pounds. You just really do not want to do that because you're going to shear those bolts off if you start cranking on them. So be careful with these. Like I said, these bolts here are going to be 32 to 45 foot-pounds. Okay, so that's it for the driver's side. Other than the sway bar end length, I still need to tighten that up, but everything else is back in. I'm going to do the passenger side here in just a second, but I'm going to do that off camera. It's the same process over again. But one thing I want to point out here as well is that you'll notice something missing, and that is that I took out the sound tube. I had the parts to delete it, this part right here, and this little plate right here, which I'll put the part numbers on the screen here, but I still need to figure out what to do with this thing here. So I may just zip tie it to the strut tower bar. I might make a bracket. I haven't figured it out. I've been trying to find the bracket from the sport model or one with an automatic, but I haven't been able to find it. It's just a really tough part to find. It's not really worth making another video on it because it's like a 5-minute job, but I thought if I'm taking these parts out, there's no reason to put them back in. So anyway, I'm going to go and do the passenger side here, and when you see me again, we'll be doing the rear.
2 weeks later.
Hey everybody, today I'm going to replace the shocks in my NC here. It's got Tokico HTS shocks in it. They're pretty old and busted. It's time for something new. You're probably asking yourself right now, hey Zeke, didn't we already see this part of the video? And yes, you did. But today, I get to do it all over again. And here's why. So it all started with this bolt right here, which you can see is kind of rounded off. It got really stuck on there. I wasn't able to get it off. And I was worried about breaking it. So rather than risk breaking it and not having the parts to replace it, I put everything back together. And I decided to start over once I had a replacement part. Sometimes things don't go the way you want them to, and that's what happened here. I had to figure out plan B, but I got past it. And part of the reason I do these videos is because I know there are people out there watching this that would not normally work on their car that might be encouraged to do so by watching one of these videos. And hey, if an idiot like me can figure this out, the rest of you probably can also. So now I'm done with the front and it's time to do the back shocks. The first thing I need to do is I need to take out the inner trunk trim. You can see there's a couple of little pop fasteners that just pop out of here. You can use a screwdriver. If you have a little fork tool like I have, you can use that. There's also fasteners all up in here that can be taken out with a flat blade screwdriver or even your thumbnail if you can get it under there and pop it out just like that. But basically you need to take out all of this trim. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a time lapse and get that all done. And one thing I should point out is there's a defeat switch for the interior trunk switch, and there's the trunk light in here. You need to pull the connectors on these when you pull this out. Next, I need to take out this metal shield, and there's several 10mm bolts around the edge that hold it in. There's a connector right here you're going to have to pull off to get this piece out. It just clips off. And I think I'm going to pull this little box out of the way here. It looks like it's a 10mm bolt on the side, a couple of clips. You can pull that out of there. So I'm just going to get that out of the way so I can get at the bolts easier. I think I'm going to take out this box right here. I'm not sure what it is, but it's kind of in the way, so I'm going to pull it out as well. There, that's much better. Now let's get this thing up off the ground. And since I don't want the car rolling away on me as soon as I lift up the back wheels, I'm going to put some chocks in front of the front wheels. Now I'm going to remove the top bolts on the shock. And I got a trick from a friend the other day who said to take off the top bolts here. And that way I can drop the shock out of here without taking any of the lower control arm stuff down underneath. So I'm going to try this, and if it fails miserably, you're going to get to see that too. But hopefully this is a good trick, so we'll see. A set of ratcheting wrenches is a good thing to have right about now. I'm going to drop the sway bar because I'm going to replace it with a smaller one. This is a flying Miata one. This is considerably heavy. It was great with these shocks, but with the coilovers, I definitely don't want as much bar. So I'm going to take this out, and I have the bar from a sport model I'm going to throw in here, a little tiny one. Next, I'm going to remove the 17mm bolt from the bottom of the shock. It's being stubborn, so I'm going to give it the BFH. And there's one more bolt up here on top, 12mm. This is the last bolt holding the shock in. There we go. All right, well, I gotta get that the rest of the way out of there. Okay, it's out. I've pre-loosened the shock here so I can adjust it here, because I'm going to have to put it on this lower bolt and then kind of adjust it up into the top. So it's going to be a little bit of a pain. But let's see if I can get this up in here, at least held in by one bolt. Okay, so the lower mount is on the suspension, and I'm going to put this bolt in here just to keep it in there. And I'm going to put the nuts on the top to hold this in. Okay, so we're in the home stretch now, almost done. So you can see I've put the sway bar back in. I had to remove my stock bushings because they're pretty trashed. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, these things are all torn up. These are no good. They are garbage. So I got me some flying Miata sway bar end links. You probably saw them on the front when I did that too. But I got them front and rear now. You can see I got the skinny bar back on there now. And these need to be tightened. You want to torque them down when the suspension is under full load. Now, in a situation like this, it's pretty hard to do. Or whenever you have your car aligned and corner balanced, you can just have them adjust it for you. I've got to put this bolt back in the shock behind there. Of course, like I did before, I'll put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. And we'll put it back here. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that these bolts don't need a lot of torque back here. The bottom shock bolt is 17 to 23 foot-pounds, so you don't really want to crank that down. You basically just want to kind of put it snug and then use your torque wrench to finish it, because it really doesn't take much on here. Yeah, there you go. And also, if you're going to do your end links, the torque spec on them is 32 to 45 pounds for stock end links. These are flying Miata end links, so their torque spec is 21 foot-pounds. And also, if you do loosen up the sway bar back here, the sway bar mounts are 13 to 19 foot-pounds, so you don't want to crank them down either. So then we still have this bolt up here to do. The torque spec on this one is 27 to 36 foot-pounds, just like the ones on top. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this one down, and then we'll torque it. And lastly, we need to tighten down the top bolts, which also are 27 to 36 foot-pounds of torque. And that's pretty much it. You just repeat the same process for the other side, and that's it. And the only thing I have left to do is I have these little extenders that I'm putting onto the adjusters for these rear shocks so that I can adjust them without taking apart my trunk. So basically you just loosen this little Allen screw in here. And these just rest on top of the cap. And then once you have it in position, you just tighten down that Allen screw. There you go. Now I've got remote adjusters for my shocks. I almost forgot to put this thing back in. And in case you're wondering what this is, it is the Sirius radio receiver, which doesn't really matter if I put it back in because it's not connected anyway. But I'm going to put it back in just for the hell of it. And I got to put this little box back in too. And of course you got to put the rest of the trunk trim back in. The installation is the same as removal in reverse. So now that everything is installed, I need to adjust the ride height. So I'm going to use this caliper to match the left and the right. Now I've taken a measurement of the other side and it's right about where I want it, I think. This one here is too high, so I'm going to make it the same height as the other one. So if I hold this up in here, you can see I've got quite a distance to go here before I can tighten this down. So what I need to do is I need to loosen this collar on the bottom so that I'm able to turn this and adjust the height. And then you adjust it by turning this small ring on the bottom. You don't want to undo the top one because this is already preloaded. It's in there really tight. It's a little bit too far right now, but when I lock down the collar at the bottom, it's probably going to be just right. And I'm probably going to want to go out and drive it a little bit and then come back and adjust it again. I saw some people recommend that you drive about 100 miles before you'll have it aligned in quarter balance. So basically now I'm going to adjust it so it's pretty much balanced between front and rear. I'm going to take it out and drive it, and then I'm going to adjust it some more. I'm going to kind of keep tweaking it, and then next week I'm having it corner balanced and aligned, which you should too. I highly recommend that you do that. And I know some of you are watching this and saying, hey, I like that shirt you're wearing. Where can I get one? Well, look in the description below. I've created a new store, and I'm going to be selling these shirts as a way of funding the cost of running the channel. This is a pretty good quality shirt. It's very soft. It's a thin fabric, so it's nice for a warm day. There's multiple colors available. I also have hats and mugs there as well, and I'm probably going to have a whole bunch of new stuff in the future. But if you want to help fund the channel, this is a good way. So if you like this, go ahead and buy some merch. Anyway, that's all I have for this one. See you next time.